Welcome to ParaTruth.
What's going on, ParaTruthers? Welcome to another episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Erik.
And tonight we are bringing on Devin Hunter and M. Belanger about the book, The Bad Vibes Field Guide. Devin holds third-degree initiations in both the Northern Star tradition of Wicca as well as the Dianic Tradition of Witchcraft, and is the founder of his own tradition, Sacred Fires. His podcast, The Modern Witch, has helped thousands of people from all over the world discover and develop their magical abilities. M. Belanger is the author of over 40 books on magic and the occult, including the Psychic Vampire Codex and the Dictionary of Demons. Founder of the magical group House Capuro, Belanger has taught energy work, psychic development, and past life work for over 30 years. We're the only openly intersex people working in the U.S. television. Belanger is widely recognized for appearances on shows like Paranormal State, Portals to Hell, and Paranormal Lockdown. And any award-winning game designer, Belanger also crafts journaling role-playing games. And without further ado, we're going to bring in Devin and M. Belanger. Michelle and Devin, welcome to ParaTruth Reborn. How are you guys doing tonight?
A little warm, but otherwise pretty good.
A little warm, yeah. It is very warm in Ohio right now.
Yeah. We're kind of doing ups and downs in North Dakota, sometimes in the 80s, then we're in the 70s, then we're down to 60s, back up to 80s. It's an odd year for nature this year. So we're bringing you guys on to talk about the Bad Vibes Field Guide. What made you both want to be a part of this project and get this book out there?
I defer to Devin because I'm a part of it, because Devin was kind enough to ask me to write a little thing to kind of introduce it to the world.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yes, and right, because Michelle, I one of the things that I liked about Michelle instantly, we met, I want to say like a decade ago at a conference before the world ended and restarted. And one of the things that we kind of instantly connected on was we had a similar kind of approach to how we help people when they're in certain circumstances or situations. And also what we were interested in researching, on our free time, right? When we have that free time. And so we hit it off, and my conversations with Michelle over the years, I think really helped me to distill my own processes, my own practices. I mean, of course, Michelle's prolific in the fact that they are, on all the TV shows and do all the things, but that's not the part of Michelle that I'm impressed with or that I'm attracted to as a creative person. I'm attracted to the part of them that is tuned in to the world that is the unseen, right? And so when the idea of jumping out of my usual niche, which is writing about witchcraft and occultism in that kind of way, and switching gears to the hat that I've worn really my whole life. Before I was a professional witch, I was a professional psychic medium. And so this has always been my life's work. It's always been what I wanted to do. I ended up writing books on witchcraft first. But this was the first, let's hop over. Let's see if we can play into this other part of my work and who I am. And so it seemed completely appropriate to reach out to Michelle and say, hey, Michelle, would you be interested in writing the foreword to my manual for how to take care of some of these things that we run into? And I was lucky because they said yes.
Yeah.
Well, and if I remember the conversation, I remember like where your booth was and just sort of like chit-chatting in front of the table. Part of that was talking about how to pass these concepts on to different audiences, like what language to use, how to communicate to people who might not have the perspective that a witch or somebody who was raised with like psychic mediumship as a background Because for me, my psychic self-defense book is the Ghost Hunter's Survival Guide, because that was the audience that needed this stuff, but didn't really have context at the time. And I could see you noodling about like, how do I take my perspective and communicate it effectively to people who need it in a language that is going to be accessible to them?
Bingo. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, now, and you can both answer this question, of course. But how do you personally define bad vibes? And are they always external, or can they stem from like internal emotional states as well?
Yes. Right. Yes, and always all. So this was a tricky thing because when I originally sat down to write this book, it was specifically looking at people who felt they were afflicted by some sort of thing, right? Whether it's energy or entity or, whatever. And I think any psychic worth their salt, any spiritual medium worth their salt is always going to, the first place they're going to look is inside, and they're going to tell you to look inside and take care of the stuff. Because the stuff can, our internal turmoil can cause all kinds of issues that we would interpret as bad vibes. In the book, the way that I approach it, because the audience shifted just a wee little bit to include people who were spiritual but not religious, people who felt things but weren't sure what to do about it, right? And they didn't necessarily want to sign up for a cult or a religion or like any of those other things. They just wanted information. And so the way that we approach bad vibes in the book is really anything that makes you feel dissonant in your environment, right? And so that can come from stuff that's happening inside of you, that can come from a spirit that you're perceiving, that can come from a generational issue, that can come from everywhere, right? And I think we do a disservice in the paranormal world when we instantly jump to there's a ghost, there's a demon, there's a what. In my work, one of the things that I've been called to do a lot of cases where we end up determining it's a poltergeist kind of thing, where it's really coming from inside the house. It's really started by somebody who wasn't able to be in a balanced place, and it causes disturbances, right? So the book 100% attacks that. Like that's one of the first things we go into, and to the point where you can't really deal with, if we want to get into the heavier stuff where let's say there is a demon, let's say there is some really hardcore stuff going on. By the time it gets that bad, by the time those things, there have been all of these moments that you could have burst the pressure. You could have taken the power away from the entity or the situation. And a lot of the times those energies, those entities, they're going to come at you and they're going to look for your vulnerabilities. And so if you're somebody who struggles with alcoholism and that's really been a dark place in your life, that's what those things are going to go right towards. And I don't even necessarily, after all these years, I don't even think it's like a malicious thing. I don't think that they're like, oh, I have to go screw a bunch of people over. I think it's more like they need food, and that's their food. That's what they are attracted to,
You
So
are tasty and easy.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, Michelle, like, yeah, because bad vibes, that's like a big.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's actually why I thought calling it bad vibes was kind of a master stroke, because it's really easy to say psychic attack or demons or dark entities, and all of that gives the stuff way too much power. So bad vibes may sound a little twee to some people, but like it really is just like there's just an energy, and maybe it's you and maybe it's that, and it doesn't matter because here's how to fix it. Yeah.
I'm glad you guys bring that stuff like that up, because I mean, we've talked about it for years, but is it just people thinking it's something that's affecting them, or is something feeding off of them? Because we all get into that type of mindset every once in a while that, everything's messed up, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and spiritual entities can attach to that. Most people want to believe that that's not the case, but I believe 100% that they can affect us. There is a difference between mental illness and then, spiritual attack, but it's one of those things where in the paranormal community, they try to make it one side or the other.
Yeah. Well, and there is the thing with mental illness and trauma and psychological problems and psychic attack and all of that stuff is there's this weird line of, terrible things are happening to you, and now you are experiencing stress and trauma, so the terrible things are even more terrible, and you have to come at it from both sides. Like, that trauma needs to be addressed from the perspective that you would ordinarily treat a psychological wound. And also, you cannot rule out the fact that there are energetic things that could be spawning from that, could have triggered it, and those also need to be addressed. So a multi-pronged approach is the best way to resolve the issue.
Right. I think
And
it's also.
add to,
No, go ahead, Bart. Go ahead.
I was going to add to that. I would say that in my experience, a lot of the times when we are in a position where we are stressed out, we're in a bad place ourselves, mentally, emotionally, whatever. I mean, like I said before, we're kind of plump and juicy for the picking. But the flip side of that too is that we live in this world where we tend to think of psychic stuff as being this receptive experience, that it's all about receiving and feeling. And that's half of the story, maybe a third of the story. Okay. So if you are a spiritual being and you are psychic and I think a lot of people are, I think a lot of people have those things already turned on, even just a little bit. And if you are one of those people and you have kind of tuned into something that is stressful and it is causing, internal disturbance, it's causing anxiety, fear, those sorts of things, you become a battery that's just pumping that energy out, because that psychic thing works both ways, right? So I think we get into more of that in occultism. We start to talk about the projective kind of ability of the human spirit. But in the paranormal world, we're so often talking about, running into energies and kind of absorbing things on accident or having something stuck to you on it. And at least in occultism, we kind of approach it from a holistic standpoint as much as possible. We tend to. And so I feel a little lucky coming at all of this from that perspective, and that, we can flip the paradigm around and just look at it a little differently. If you're fixing a Rubik's Cube, you have to flip it around to solve the puzzle, right? And so I think a book like this, what was exciting to me, to kind of get back to that first question a little bit about this project, was that we were able to take both of those fields and really bring them together.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I bring part of my psychology background into stuff. I think you can't really have psychic without psychology. Like, you need to look at it. It's all happening in your head,
Right.
one way or the other. Are there instances where classic demonic infestation or what that happens? Yes. And the most classic case of demonic possession that I ever got called in to handle, the girlfriend called me in because she was witnessing what was happening. There was like intense poltergeist-like stuff. She had seen this thing, like it was friends saw and were experiencing attacks from it. But at the core, the person who was the focus, he had been in jail for a while, so he had a bunch of trauma related to that. He had a bunch of trauma related to childhood stuff. There was addiction in the core there too. And there was a lot of just deeply unresolved wounds on his part, and an ability to project his emotions, his emotional turmoil. And effectively, he had created an egregore. He had created this demon that was attacking him, that was in many ways the embodied imagining of everything that he was carrying around. But it was so intense that it was now real. Other people were experiencing it. And so he'd gone to a lot of people, and they're like, it's all in your head, like it's all in your head. And all he took away from that was, you're crazy and these things aren't happening. But, he's got his girlfriend to go, but these things are happening. So the solution there was to very gently explain, yes, it's real. And also, it will not go away until you address these other things. And you are a part of this, and you can't extricate yourself from it until you seal those wounds. And I was lucky enough to, through a friend of a friend, be able to refer him to a counselor in his area who was open to really wild and weird stuff, and was able to like actually get him to a point where he could kind of separate himself and his trauma and this entity and everything else that was attacked. But like, if I didn't have my background and I just judged what was going on, like I'd have been calling an old priest a young, pulling a whole like pollen water. But it wouldn't have solved his problem.
Right.
No, and I actually dealt with a woman who had a similar situation. She claimed there was a demon upstairs in her attic, and her son saw it regularly as well. And she said this was with them for a couple of months before she reached out to Justin and I. Anyway, we went through. I come from a very Christian background, so we went through prayer and talked to her about different ways to get rid of it. And it's pretty wild because, like, even in a prayer group where we were praying over her, I didn't tell anyone the situation. But one of my friends came up to me and said, while we were praying, I heard about this demon. And he explained it to a T of what she told me it was. And I was like, well, that's wild, right? But I also learned later, like about a week later, because apparently it disappeared. And then a week later, she told me that it's back. And I kind of got her eventually to kind of tell me what's really deep, like the deeper things that are happening. And she was living with her mother at the time, who was causing her great stress and anxiety. They did not get along at all. And as soon as her mom came, but she was gone for like a week or something, and she came back to the house, and suddenly this entity appeared again. So we had to go through that and explain to her like how these type of emotions, how these relationships can actually create these entities and make things seem, I mean, it's very much real. There's no question about that at that point. But there are other ways to remove that entity, and part of it comes with the healing process between the relationships that she's in.
No, and it raises the really weird question of like, is it a created thing coming from the person, or is it an external thing that is very conveniently using that as the mask that it wears? And there's a point where you can't always tell.
Right.
And for me,
or both, or it's both.
or both, like all of the above at once. And one of the things that I liked about Devin's book is it's not concerned about like so much the like minutia of identifying it down to a core. It's how do you address the problem? Where do you start? Where are the building blocks to get to a place where you are in a healthier space and it's not your problem anymore?
Now, how, like, for the normal person that may not have the sensitivities or not have them as much as others, how can you differentiate and distinguish between a natural emotional response and energetic disturbance or a negative entity attaching onto that energy?
So a lot of it just comes down to observing yourself, being aware of know thyself, as the old term says, right? So I often tell people, your anxiety sounds a lot like your spirit guide, right? And people get really upset or worked up. Oh, my spirit guide's telling me this. Is it your spirit guide, or is that your anxiety, right? So let's sleep on it, right? Let's think about it. So what we know with paranormal activity is that if it's something that we have to be worried about, it'll come back. It'll repeat. It'll be repetitive, right? Mm-hmm. If it's something that is triggered by you, then the repetition is going to come once the event is triggered because XYZ happened, right? Otherwise, you're looking at what I try to tell people, whether it's I'm working one-on-one with a client or we're in a big conference and there's a bunch of people, and I try to always circle back to this idea that you have all the power. You have all the power. And this was a really hard thing to learn, like early on in my life as a psychic medium and going through. And I would get into these cases where people were they had no power over no power over themselves, no power over their lives. And they were in dark places just mentally and spiritually. And I'm like, I don't personally care who you pray to. I don't give a, that's between you and them. Right. We all have our own imaginary friend, right? Like I'm okay with mine, I'm okay with you having yours, right? Where we draw the problem is when we try to stick everything into a dome where we're all using the same words, we're all using the same terms. And because, if I say demon, I, as an occultist and as a paranormal person, demon is a very loaded word for me in a way it is not loaded for my mom, who is religious and is very, so yes, very heavy term, but in a different way, right? And so once we start really working with people and we really start talking, I think if we were to push just the spiritual stuff, the psychic stuff away from it, we're dealing with a very human experience. That's the first thing. There's nothing abnormal about your paranormal stuff. Not that you're not special or not that, but none of that. But this is a human thing that you're going through. And so if you're worried about, if am I experiencing something that's authentic, or is this something that might be, we'll say, a little bit more on the imaginary side or the influenced side, then take time. Think about it, meditate on it, right? The other thing too, I think is really important, and this is so hard for a lot of people, and I get it, but have good people in your life. And because you want to go to them and say, I just had this weird thing happen. I feel a little blah. I feel like this is weird. Can you come check this out? Right. One of the best spiritual mentors in my life is somebody who's not at all spiritual. They're an atheist. And they were able to look at a situation and go, you do realize this is psycho, right? Or you do realize this is not healthy, right? And of course I know that, but hearing that from somebody who's not into any of this is so grounding, right? And it allows you to approach things in a way that takes the pressure off of your spirituality. We, as human beings, whether even again, my atheist friends, they're very invested in their spiritual view, right? And so we love that search for ourselves. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We're traditionally taught, especially here in the States, to have a lot of, but spirituality is very heavy in long-term influences in our lives, things like that. So I think if we're able to cut a lot of the stuff out and we distill it, you're a human having a very human experience. Even if it is a very spiritual experience, it's still very human. And where's your power in the situation? So if you don't know, that's the first place to look. Where's your power in the situation, right? And if you need backup, you need a friend to come in and say, hey, it was a little weird. That's okay. That's a good thing. What I learned is I can't go to my super spiritual woo-woo friends with all my problems, because they're, especially at this point, because I've written books and I've been on TV and things, people just assume I'm right about everything. And I'm like, no, I need you to talk me down, right? Like, So I have learned very much to just keep, if this is what you do on a day-to-day basis, keep your community open, keep your influences open, right? So that you have the ability to step out of the box when you need to. And if you're somebody who doesn't have that, then what I say is ultimately you need to look for that. If it's part of your daily life, you need to look for that because it's part of your toolkit, right? Did I answer your question or did I go off on a whole tangent?
No, that was good.
From my part, I'm a broken record about journaling, but keep a record. Like, write down, what are you experiencing? But more than that, what do you feel? What was your day like? Like, what else is going on? And get a record so you can compare, like, when does this happen? When it is more likely to happen? If you're really worried that it's all in your head and you happen to have pets, do they react to it? Like, are they seeing something? Because you can't front load your cat to see a ghost, or your dog to bark at, the bad, weird energy in the corner. Your friends, you might be able to front load, especially if they're woo woo like you. And you've like gotten them all spun up about it. But if you've got like an animal that is responding to it, that's a pretty good indication that there's something going on. But that record, especially if you don't have the option of having other people around you that you feel comfortable to trust and you feel comfortable to trust their perspective, getting data and a long bit of data to get a sense of like what's actually going on is pretty much your best approach. This is so interesting right now. Come here.
I do have to say, like, with the pets, like, I told you, Michelle, that I've had my cats for 11 months now. And prior to that, it's been a while since I've lived with animals, and I've seen, mind you, my house is 60 years old. My mom grew up here. My grandfather owned it, and it's been haunted ever since she was a little girl. And it was haunted when I grew up, and I was able to clear it once I moved back in. But every once in a while, the cats, everything's fine, and suddenly their fur stands up. They look out into the hallway that I can see plainly, and there's nothing there, but they see something. And immediately it's like I'm in like investigation mode, maybe not literally going into a ghost investigation, but I'm investigating myself. I'm investigating the situation. Like, what are they seeing? What are they feeling? Things like that. And it's really cool because one of our friends, actually, who also has a podcast on the network that we're with, she said that she has this feeling. She kind of senses that these cats are kind of spiritually connected with me throughout multiple ages of life. And it's like, ever since they came into my life, it's just, there's this connection with the spiritual. They're like, okay, this is kind of wild because things cleared up real fast when they came in here too. Almost as if whatever was here was just like, nope, but black cats are here. We're out.
There's a reason why you're stereotypical witchers, familiar. Like,
The Egyptians knew what they were talking about.
Listen,
Right? And like I refuse to live in a house without cats because they shoo things away and I swear to it. And
let me, I've got an outside cat. I don't even know where she came. She first showed up during the solar eclipse, and she left me over the course of several weeks 3 rusted iron nails.
Wow.
Which are traditionally used for protection.
Right.
Here over winter, I worried maybe she came back and again introduced herself with a series of 3 rusted iron nails, identical nails.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, seriously,
Really?
like she's bizarre. And also, like, she is not an indoor cat. I'm like, nope, you are just walking the perimeter. You're there to like keep. I'm this.
Yeah.
Obviously, get some fancy feast every day and call it great.
right.
Not entirely convinced she's entirely cat. That's fine too.
So there's so many ways to clear one's energy, and I've seen so many of them. You've got a bunch listed in the book. How should someone choose what works for them?
Literally what works for them. Like, try a bunch of stuff, and if you're doing something you just feel so painfully awkward, don't do that. If it makes you feel silly, if you can't get behind it, don't do it. If there is something that is not written in the book and you're like, well, I have a feeling that maybe if I tried this, it would work, and that excites you and that makes you feel safe, do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have gone through, I've worked with some of the best teachers, and, I've had some incredible people come and try to teach me how to do the things, right? And at the end of the day, what I've learned is that it doesn't matter if there's a one size fits all solution that everyone else has. It may not fit for you, as we were just kind of hinting around, to the point where I grew up in the age where you could just clear everything with white sage. Just burn the white sage and it would take care of it. Well, here's an interesting thing. I never liked white sage. I thought it stank, and I use it if I gotta, that kind of a thing. But it never really resonated with me, and I would often leave the experience like jittery. And then I found out during an herbal course that I was taking that there is a chemical in white sage that when it is burned, it releases and it causes anxiety. And so that's why it shoos things away. And I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But for me, I didn't want to go to, right? So I'd have these teachers who know if this is how you cleanse yourself, and it just didn't work, or I didn't understand the depth of what I should be experiencing during a cleansing, right? And so it took a long time using different methods, trying different things out to find what actually worked for me. And also learning that same thing may not work in every situation, right? So for me, and I talk about this in the book, I have a kind of go-to things that I'll do on a more regular basis. And then even to this day, I still will go to a friend of mine who practices a completely different tradition, and I will go, hey, can I hire you to do a cleansing on me or do a cleansing for me? Just because I want to know things, I want to feel things, I want to experience, those things. But I also know that I don't know everything, right? And I can walk through, especially with this, you guys know this stuff we get called in to go take care of and do, and so you never know. So I'm always like, hey, just at least once a year, have somebody else come in, take a look. Like, that's cool. Not everybody can do that, and I totally get that. But if you have if you have friends, if you have pets, if you have things that are signaling, take advantage of it. Practice different types of cleansing methods. And and it's often a lot easier, I think, than people are expecting it to be. I know sound is a big thing for me. I love working with sound. I have a music background. And so it just seemed very natural to me to work with sound as a cleansing method. And it also makes sense. We're dealing with vibrations, all of those things really line up. And then one of the things that was really surprising to me, I took this laughter yoga class as just a thing for a friend because they wanted to do it, kind of a thing. And I walked, and the whole experience is just, you make yourself laugh and you release endorphins, right? And I realized that what a great tool to use for cleansing, right? And so I had a house call I went in and the woman had they were having all kinds of experiences, and there was a lot of different things happening on at the house, and there were kids and a lot of stuff going on. And she needed a cleansing, right? But they were allergic to certain things. You couldn't burn. Like there was a lot of going into it that we had to kind of dance around to get the cleansing done. Okay. So how about we do this? So I had her have a party, invite all of her friends over with a couple glasses of wine and tell some jokes and start laughing and really get raucous and get that energy up, and then go touch the walls. Right. So a residual haunting happens. How do you take care of that? Right. So we all grew up in here. We were in the 90s. We know how to record over tapes. We know how to take care of, so it's this idea that like something as simple as laughter can have a profound effect. And I'm not trying to be like a
No, it's
you hit me that it works.
so some of the darkest stuff, they don't have a sense of humor. If you ever see me on the TV shows, I give the scariest stuff the most ridiculous nicknames, and I try to get those nicknames thick, because humor chases away some of the nastiest stuff. It literally cannot. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have that. So yeah, no, laughter, humor. There's a great deal of power there, and it not mean smirk mockery, but like actual like belly laugh silliness.
Yeah. I mean, because you do need to, if we're talking about it from a strictly a psychic perspective, you are creating a massive amount of energy when you do that. But it really does have to come from an authentic place. It really has to be an authentic experience, right? Yeah, because when you're having that experience with the spirit, it's authentic, right? So yeah, so you really got to do it. You can't half it, right? But there's something really powerful to that. So when it comes to cleansing methods, to kind of circle back, sometimes the most simple thing will be the most effective in your situation, and sometimes the thing that you were told would take care of it is so off from who you are and what you do that it's not going to be effective. It doesn't really, no matter how many times you're going to try it. So it really is, as Michelle said, trial and error. You got to practice things. You got to roll the dice and see how it goes, and then build from there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think there's a great deal of power in taking your power, like being the one who does it. Like there's, to become that empowered to conquer the fear is the most foolproof way to drive stuff away. And sometimes you're just not in the headspace to do that. So being comfortable with someone to help you, like there's nothing wrong in asking for that help and finding someone who is reputable to assist you, especially if you can't extricate yourself emotionally from the experience.
Mm-hmm. And a little side to that. So in my other books and my other things, I talk about putting energy in things so you can store that energy and access it later. So if you are having a really good day and you're feeling yourself and you're feeling on fire and all those things, grab a crystal, grab a thing that you're going to use, a pendant or whatever is important to you, and load that sucker up with that energy, because there's going to be a day where you feel like, like the tail end of a horse, and you're not feeling like you can connect. You're not feeling like you can ground yourself. And if you have that, you can go grab that thing. It's push the button, it'll do it for you. You know what I mean? So it's also about preparing for the days when it's going to rain, right? And know that if you've got an umbrella, it's going to be a lot easier to get through that storm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, now, so when you guys are really saying that, anyone should just try anything to some extent, in terms of cleansing the energy. But we've had a number of people on our show actually who have said some similar things talking about energy, but then they'll say, but you shouldn't use this method to cleanse because this method belongs to a particular people group. For example, saging, Native Americans. And so there's a lot of people who tend to fear or believe they shouldn't or couldn't do it. So can you guys do you have anything you can say to those type of people who are listening right now who maybe want to try that, but are too fearful and, because they're scared they're going to offend somebody?
Yeah, this has actually been a big conversation that we've had a lot in the occult world, because there's a lot of accidental appropriation that happened over the years. And we're kind of reconciling that now as we're able to just communicate more and kind of cross boundaries with community. And, I grew up literally going to powwows and being taught to smudge by Native people. And I always assumed that was okay. And I was taught this with the specific intention, as it was conveyed to me, that it was medicine that was being shared and that I was to go do it. It would make the world better by practicing it. And so I still hold to that truth because that's how it was given to me in a very authentic setting. That said, I don't sell white sage in my store, right? And the reason why I won't do that is because I live in the place where white sage comes from. I'm surrounded by these tribes, and I know from talking to them that they feel like the work with the white sage was appropriated by other indigenous cultures and then taught to people who were outside of that culture. And so they're saying, hey, you're doing this in this contextual way that is not appropriate. And I had to really sit down and figure that out. Well, what does this mean? And at the end of the day, it does get down to, let's be respectful of any living people and their memory. And any people who aren't living in their memory. I think we just need to be respectful of people. We're all people having a human experience, right? But that being said, no culture has all the answers. Doesn't matter who you are, right? The Romans didn't have all the answers. America doesn't have all the answers. We know culture in any setting has all the answers. And so I think to say, oh, I want to try something like white sage, and that is going to be the thing that fixes it, but it's outside of my culture, so I can't use that. Okay, no, not really, right? Like, it works in that culture, in that setting, right? So if we were to talk about any other herb or any other situation, Palo Santo is a great thing. I love Palo Santo. Michelle, I know you like Palo Santo.
I like it for use. I'm also deeply allergic to it.
It's heavy, right? But that's something that, like, the wood, the trees have to fall and be on the ground sun-baked for 4 years before they can legally be harvested. So there's like protections around it, right? So there's a whole lot that goes into a lot of these practices that are related to what we consider to be indigenous practices. And I've had people on the other side say, well, you're white, so you can't do anything that doesn't come from white people. I've had white people tell me this, right? And then I have my Indian friend go, no, that's crap. What are you talking about? Right? So, like, no, you got to do this way. And so I think at the end of the day, if you are respectful and you are listening and you're not going around trying to teach people somebody else's cultural heritage, I think experience, right? If it's available to you. And I would say that with just about anything. But it's not, I would say where we draw the line for sure is, as a white person, I'm not going to go teach people how to smudge. That's not my medicine to share. There was medicine that was shared with me, but it isn't my medicine to share. So I'm not going to do that. If I go to a client's house, I won't burn white sage, right? Now the alternative to this was we did a cleansing last year on what is now a vineyard, and the vineyard is on land that is traditionally homed native people and tribes that were pushed out. So in that process, we absolutely burned a whole bunch of white sage, but it was as an offering and not as a cleansing. And in that way, it was just honor that culture and that place and the cleansing work that we were trying to do. So you got to be smart about it. You got to be mature about it. You got to think of if you're really upset, if you're really worried about it, right? Then think about it from that perspective of, if this was my culture, would I feel respected? And if the answer is no, don't do it.
It's a careful line to navigate between appreciation and appropriation. And I mean, appropriation obviously is, I'm going to use white sage and to also dress up with war paint. And like if you are like absolutely just trying to and just complete insensitivity to it. Yeah. If you are doing it as if you are, well, I'm just as good as the people who are doing this. My recommendation for people is, one, read up on it, do some research, learn about the roots of this practice and how to do it right. And if it still speaks to you, do your best to be as sensitive and honor it as much as possible. And also, especially with smoke cleansing, it's not just a white sage thing. Europeans used rosemary and a bunch of other things. The lighting up of a thing and using smoke from it to cleanse things is not one culture or another. And if you are hesitant to use white sage and you feel on some level beholden to only speak to your own roots, what are those roots? It's a fascinating deep dive to figure out what were the practices that got erased from my Irish and my French and my Akkadian ancestors and the random little Eastern European branch that's over there. What did they do? And what plants are immediately in my area that have those associations that I'm not stealing from anybody.
Yeah. Well, and to that point too, I think you said something really important I want to reinforce, which is this idea that just because you're lighting it doesn't mean it's smudging. And that's something that's been we use that term smudge in a very appropriative way. That's the problem. And so
that really is like smudging is a very specific ceremony, and smoke cleansing is not.
Or the term we often ban around is like fumigation, right? So fumigation rituals, and those things have been time immemorial. People have been burning crap to get rid of crap. Like that's just how it goes. So there are so many options with that. And if you're Christian, I always tell people to look at you have so much information in that book on how to take care of some stuff, right? And so there's resin blends, like there are sacred resin blends in your book that will tell you how to purge things, how to get rid of.
It's frankincense and myrrh. Just throw it in anything. It's just about all.
But there's so many ways that you can approach this work and make it accessible, because it's a human thing, right? From all cultures, all backgrounds, all places, we've all been struggling with these things, and we all developed ways of dealing with them. And so, here in America, and it was really like the 80s and the 90s just made us lazy with smudging and with white sage. And now you can go to a head shop and buy white sage. And, it's just changed completely from its original root. So I don't at all get upset when somebody's like, that's not right. I get it. Right. But there are so many ways to go and cleanse yourself. And there's so many practices that I think, regardless of who you are, your spiritual allegiances, you can find techniques that can fit into your own book of, right? I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, to me, it only becomes harmful when it's appropriative in the sense that you are presenting yourself as equal or better than the people you're taking the idea from.
Okay. Now, this is a term I've only heard within the past 15 or so-ish years, is transmuting negative energy. So can you explain the concept of transmuting rather than banishing?
Yeah. So if you are, and Michelle's I know you're gonna put some really good whipped cream sugar topping in. But so energy is energy, right? And we know from physics that the graveyard of energy is like heat, right? Even that's not 100%, right?
Right.
So energy is energy. Energy is constantly shifting and moving and doing all kinds of things. And so when we perceive something, if you can feel a palpable force and you're interpreting it as energy, you can use that energy. And we've been doing this in witchcraft and occultism since the day is long. The idea of like, you feel cursed, or you feel like somebody's throwing magic at you, will collect that energy, transmute it, and make it work for you. Like that's the wickedest thing you could ever actually do. When somebody wants you to fail and you take that energy, that's nasty crap that they're sending you, and you turn it around to like push you through and make you successful. Oh, that's so wicked, right? And so energy is something that we are constantly working with and dealing with, whether you know it or not. You're running into it all the time, whether you know it or not. And we tend to be a little more hands-on with it in occultism. But when we're talking about this idea of like everyday transmutation, what can I do? What are the things that are zapping you and like stealing from you, right? What's the monkey on your back? How can you take the monkey that's been on your back and make it do tricks so it pays the rent, right? And that's the stuff that we've been talking about in occultism for so long. It can boil down to something as simple as shadow work, right? Where you're taking this your childhood trauma and you are transmuting it through the process of healing. And suddenly that trauma has the ability to heal other people, right? That is an absolute transmutation of that energy to empower you, right? So we can take that same principle and apply it to an area or a home where there has been some sort of psychic fracture, right? Where there is a residual haunting, right? And so you can take that residual energy and you can transmute it, right? You can, and so the difference between just like cleansing it away or banishing something is you're saying it's not welcome here. It's not part of the paradigm. You literally have to kind of rip the carpet from underneath it in order to make it go, right? That's what you're doing. But you could also just say, hey, right? This energy that is wild, right? It has no purpose it is stuck. This residual haunting, this energy is stuck here and it just plays on repeat over and over and over again. How can I take this energy and unstick it? And then once it's unstuck, what are you going to do with it, right? And that's where that transmutation stuff comes into play. And the idea being that if you are somebody who's up against the spiritual world, the psychic world, and you're interacting with things, you have to develop a system, you have to develop an arsenal, you have to develop a toolkit that allows you to navigate through all of those things. Transmutation allows you to do that. And in a very mild sense, again, it's that, I'm going to sit down and meditate and think about the things that have really pissed me off today, right? And in a really grand sense, it's working with bigger tools, crystal grids, working with sound, working with the natural ecosystem and understanding the ley lines, right? And really working with the bigger system to take the energy that's coming into your space or coming into your body and making sure that before it goes through you or gets to you, it's been filtered. The particles have been removed that are negative or that are going to be toxic for you. And you still have that chemical. So let's add something else to it, or let's purify it in this other way so that you can still have that water, because the world is dry, right? And so just because we're dipping in from a well that might be toxic doesn't mean you can't cleanse it, doesn't mean you can't repurpose it, right? And to that end, using that water as a metaphor, there's water that you're not going to drink, but you're going to use it to water your plants, right? And so transmutation allows us to look at energy as a source, as a substance that can be manipulated in ways that are beneficial to us, regardless of the maliciousness that might be behind them or the benevolence that might be behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a couple of directions I can take it. I mean, the simplest one is from a psychological perspective. You may have heard the term reframing. It's used in cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's like looking at an experience that was a really unpleasant experience and seeing it from a different perspective and basically shifting how you relate to it. And that's one way, and probably the simplest way to transmute energy or attacks for things like bad vibes, is shifting how you relate to it. There's a more pop culture one. So if you're a Reverend Mother from Dune, using sheer willpower to change the waters of Shai-Hulud to the waters of life, like being able to take something into you. Now that there are ways as an energy worker, there are more advanced ways to take something that is horrible and through sheer willpower, through your abilities as an energy worker it's all still energy, to change it because it's still power. And I just taught a class on Sir Isaac Newton. So alchemy is really, really big on my mind. And that's where the term that we're familiar with comes from, the transmutation of base metals into lead into gold. And we think of alchemy as a physical thing, but in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, the people who were practicing alchemy also recognized it as a spiritual path. So when they were talking about these very Baroque processes that on one level gave us chemistry, on the other end, they're talking about ways of transmuting and changing and sublimating experiences and energies and refining the self from lead into gold from a spiritual perspective. And looking at it like that, of taking something that may seem foul or very base, like lead, a hard, heavy, just not valuable thing, and finding ways to shift it, to change it. And again, if we're talking purely as an energy worker, I mean, Devin hit on filtering, pulling it in, eating it. Sin eater is also another, literally not how it was, but the way that we now understand sin eating, which is to take someone else's bad things, take them, literally consume them, digest them, and turn them into something new. Side note, actual sin eating was literally paying a beggar off the street to eat all the things that they put the sins in so the guy who had the funeral would go to heaven. It's a whole weird thing.
It's very weird. Well, no, so let's just talk a little bit about actual like entities, right? Well, any spirits, and especially negative spirits, because a lot of people, I guess I can't say a lot, but there are people out there who will try to cleanse an area to get rid of a negative energy or a negative entity. And in some cases, those entities don't go away, they just get angry. And that could be really hard for people, especially when they don't know anything about the spiritual realm and, understand the whole process of really cleansing. They're just, probably read something online. It's like, let's do this. And then, oh, wait, we're in a really bad situation. I guess, first of all, can you give some sort of encouragement to those type of people who are maybe going through such a thing? And what are some elements that you've learned over the years in such situations? Like if you've met people or if you've been through something yourself, like, how did you go about maintaining the process of fighting against that entity and eventually driving it out if they can't actually afford to call someone else in or there's no one that they can reach out to help them?
I'm going to hop in first on this one because I've had to do a lot of this. I mean, the first question is, was it there first? Does it have more right than you to be there? And so are you fighting against something that is like part of the land that your house is built on? Because it's not going anywhere. And that's where finding a way to work with it, work around it, finding a different approach than just trying to like drive it away is in many ways your only recourse. Sometimes things seem negative because they're angry or because they're wounded. So the first thing is, if we're talking an entity, an actual spirit of some sort, assessing what is this thing? Is it grandma and she's just so frustrated that we're not hearing her, that she's now throwing things around just out of sheer frustration, and that seems like a demon to us? Is it a stain of some terrible thing that happened that just is soaked into where your home happens to be? Is it actually the land spirit, which frankly we don't do a very good job of keeping up on them, like we are doing horrible things to them kind of daily, that we've lost an ability to have a healthy relationship with? Is it something that's come in that actually can be kicked out? So like going through the list, and don't worry about the words that we give these things. Land, white, ghost, demon, whatever, like the actual word is less important than how does this thing behave? How does it react to you? Can you communicate with it? Is it open to communication? Can it be reasoned with? Is there a kind of contract you can achieve with it? Like, can you work something out if you can't drive it away? So that's more where I start. Like, how do I have a conversation with this? What am I talking to? And can it be reasoned with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Have you heard the term Chinese room before, by chance? Anybody else there?
I have.
Okay. If you're a sci-fi person, you're probably like, yes, I don't know that.
Yeah.
So for those who aren't aware, the Chinese room is a thought experiment in which the basic concept is that there could be a computer that you sit in front of, and its job is to take information that you're sending into it and translate it into Chinese. Well, what we just say Mandarin, we'll say Mandarin. And that as it's doing that, it learns. And so eventually, over time, this computer will develop, just the programming will develop enough that it could fool anybody else into thinking it was a person and that you were having a conversation with a person. It's not a person. It has just received information. It has a program that learns how to kind of give you what you want. And it's not sentient. It isn't conscious in the way that we kind of think of an alive being or a being. In the paranormal world, the thing that I've been really the last decade chewing on, and the thing that I've gone through my old notes from cases, and the thing that I've been running into with other cases, and it's along the lines of poltergeist, but is this idea of the Chinese room as an entity experience, and that we can create, or energy itself can develop its own kind of programming, right? Where it's spitting things back out to you, which you will perceive as consciousness or you will perceive as sentience, but it's not. right? It's its own kind of thing that's there, and it exists, and it's a tricky thing. I used to call it like a half-life with one of my clients. They'd be like, "Oh, it's got like a half-life. It's there. It's kind of smart. It's not really smart. It's just kind of." And a good example of this is if you ever go. So many of us experience this when we do house calls. You go into a house and you can feel a tension kind of pull in the corner, like the top corner. And in my head, I used to perceive those as like little bugs kind of crawling up, and they weren't hurting anybody. They're just there. They live in the shadow. It's whatever it is. I could go to the same place over and over again when I would train people, and we'd go back to the same haunts. You kind of go because you're going to get at a certain level of activity. And over the years, noticing that those little bugs got bigger and they got a little smarter. And suddenly I remember I gave a joke name called it Joe. And I came back a year later and I said, "Oh, Joe's here." And it responded with hello. And was it smart? No, I think very much just adaptive. Right. And so there is a lot when we're experiencing this firsthand that we might want to assume an entity has an intention that may not be there, or it may be smarter or more direct than it actually truly is. And in the world of poltergeist, the kind of the big "haha, I've gotcha" is that as psychic agents, we're creating energy, we're creating a psychic phenomena that is usually caused through anxiety or stress or things that aren't being relieved, right? Pressure building up. And this same thing can happen with that Chinese room energy experience. So it's a tricky thing for people. And I think it's really important that and I talk about this in the book. The first thing is you're always in control. So the minute you feel like you're losing control, stop and remind yourself you're in control. I have little affirmations and things. And those are there for a reason. They're there to help get you back into the headspace that you need to be in order to really approach whatever is going on. And so, you want to get your power back in these situations, but you really want to make sure that you're aware. It can't hurt you if you don't give it a footing to do that. And this took a long time and a lot of cases and a lot of me going in like a dumb, ass and doing dumb things and learning, oh no, that isn't how we fix this problem. That's not going to work. Right. And so going in and realizing that this doesn't have power to begin with. The whole thing is an illusion, but it's all in your head. So the minute you believe, oh shit, there's a ghost, you just created this foothold for this thing to come in and go. But if you're, as you know, Michelle, we got to go in. Sometimes you got to fake it. Sometimes you're going to be like, you puff chest out and do all the things. You have to present a certain way. So there is no foothold that can be taken, right? And so it's all in your head. And that's not a bad thing. Your head is how you perceive things. It's okay, right? But keep in mind that it's coming through your filters. It's coming through, and your filters are developed from your background, your propensities, your pet peeves, right? So that's why we can watch, these ghost hunting shows, and you get the one show where it's always a demon. It's always a demon, right? Yep. And why is it always a demon? Well, to that person, that's what the language is. That's how they perceive things. So when I reference it as a demon,
energy is just a mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I like that one too. And that's it, right? And so you got that little bit too, right? So I think it's really important that the first thing when things start developing is that you really ground and center yourself in that moment and you take the reins back, right? Even if you've just got to fake it, right? But you take the reins back, because if it is a big oogly boogly, then you can't afford in the long term, especially, to play with it and to play around with yourself in the situation. But if you're in a place where it isn't a big oogly boogly, then you could potentially exhaust a lot of energy that could even train things later on down the road. And I don't want to put that in as another fear for people to have here, but if we're looking at some of those bigger things that happen, again, a lot of these situations avalanche, they snowball into these bigger problems. And if we take the minutia out, so much of it really boils down to how did you respond? Right? Because if it's not a tiger, it's not like you literally have to run away from the tiger because it's right at you, right? It's the perception of a tiger. Well, is it the shadow are you seeing the shadow of a little kitten that's just being projected to look like a tiger, right? Because oftentimes that's the natural response. We know this from nature, right? We know that this happens. This is how things camouflage themselves. So if we're seeing all these patterns happen in nature, why on earth would we not assume the same is happening in the spiritual side, right? In the paranormal, what I refer the preternatural is my favorite word for it. But why wouldn't we assume those things? So I think, yes, there are real dangers out there, but so much of what the intensity of that danger and the actual realization of that danger happens in the translation, in the personal translation, the personal kind of relationship that you develop with that thing. So if you go into these situations automatically assuming that people will walk past a homeless person and go, no, because they don't want to give that homeless person $1. But they will walk into a house that's supposedly haunted and they're like, oh, right? No, it's not, right? What are you doing, right? You're meaner to the homeless living person than you are the spirit. And then you're wondering why you get attachments, right? And so if you go into it with the same thing of, no, this thing wants something from me, then you're going to have a totally different relationship. You don't have to be a dick about it, right? You don't have to be mean about it, but you can go into it realizing, okay, this thing wants something from me, even if it's just a little taste of your power, right? Or of your psychic energy or whatever, right? It wants something. And what I have witnessed personally in my own life and in the life of my clients is that oftentimes once you start that thing, when you're nursing it, it's going to continue to manipulate and twist and to get that nutrients from you. And so that's when we're talking about it builds into these things that it just doesn't have to become. And yet we're often kind of providing the pathway for it without knowing it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Energy is programmable and imprintable, often with emotion. Energy needs an energy to perpetuate itself. There absolutely are sentient things out there, but a lot of what people are encountering are sort of echoes that they're sort of putting into the world, mirror reflections and things like that. And yeah, like if you do think it is a sentient thing, the first thing to do is to try to understand it and communicate with it. Like, even if you think it's big and bad, because it's not going to get any worse if you try to have an open dialogue, as long as you're holding good emotional boundaries.
And to that end too, Michelle, I will say that, as much as they say like, oh, this is a human experience, we're having a human experience, they're having a human experience too. And I think that when it indicates where you are having these entities, these things, especially if if you can identify them as being human or originating from humanity, reminding them that they're human will often deflate a lot of that stuff going on over on the other side.
So many of like the really bad experiences I've seen people have are because something wanted to communicate with them and was just getting more and more and more frustrated, or was coming to it with so much emotion that all the person felt was the emotion, was the yelling, was that it was overwhelming. And so they got scared and it just made it worse and worse and worse. So like the first step is assess, and try to figure out, like, is this actually dangerous? Is this actually as bad as I am interpreting it? And what can I do to de-escalate and try to solve it? And way better than trying to kick something out is trying to get something to agree to where the boundaries should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the book, I created a system based off, I took all the notes and sat down and was like, how did I work this out if I'm actually working with a client? And so I have this little system, it's a scale. And it'll tell you like, okay, if this is the activity you have, these are the things you have to do. And it's cumulative, by the way. So as you go up, you have to do everything level 1 in order to complete level 2, right? But if you do that, it should take care of stuff. Like, and it legitimately should take care. If you're really investing the time to take care and you're doing these steps, it should take care of stuff. And if it doesn't take care of stuff, then there's information on what to do next, right? But 99.999% of the problems that we run into really can be taken care of with what I talk about in the book, with even the extreme cases in mind. So I tried very hard to think about it, because not everybody can, right, get to somebody like me or Michelle and hire us to come in and, all the things. That's what the book is for.
There's one situation that I'd encountered multiple times where stuff will always come back. And that's if on some level, you, the person experiencing it, enjoy the attention.
Boom. Boom.
Yeah.
Like there's something you're getting out of it. Like you're actually but you're invested in your fear. You're like, and that takes some really deep level self-assessment and honesty to be like, oh, well, maybe I am, not to say that you're asking for it, but that like you've now gotten so used to the chaos and the drama and the attention that you're feeding it.
You're conditioned.
Yeah,
You've
like
conditioned.
you've gotten bought into it, and maybe you got manipulated into that buy-in, but like you have to detach emotionally from the experience. Don't give it fear. Don't give it attention. Don't just starve it. Treat it like the worst narcissist you've ever met in your life.
Right.
No attention.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
And it took me some time to learn that, because I can humbly admit that I was one of those who, after going through a 3-month oppression, I truly believe it's demonic oppression. These entities would show up in my bedroom at night. I would get night terrors, nightmares, all these different things. And I was in a really low place. And once I finally got rid of it, there came a time where I did miss it, because life kind of became boring all of a sudden. I'm like, man, I wish that this was still happening. It was kind of an exciting thing, and it eventually did come back multiple times. And, it took a long time for me to realize, wait a minute, I am definitely emotionally energizing this thing and calling it to me, through the spiritual realm in some way, and I had to find out what that was and why, and then just cut it out, And it's wild how easy it could be too.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's, to me, kind of like what's gotten mythologized into inviting something in. It's not so much that, like, oh, you opened a tarot deck and you have invited it into your life. Like, there's just something going on where this is now interesting. Like, this is feeding into your sense of being a victim, or the sense that you're depressed and everything should be terrible, or like whatever you have to unpack to solve. Which again is why I say, like, even though there is legitimate paranormal stuff happening, there's always going to be a psychological angle that needs to be addressed.
And that's why if I actually end up working with somebody on a house call, the deal that I make with them, because now we sign contracts and stuff, because I've been doing this for a minute and I know better.
Smart.
But the deal is, you have to go to a therapist 3 times. You have to have 3 meetings with a therapist. And it doesn't matter if it resolved and talk about the issue there. I don't care. But the idea is that if we're really going to cleanse your house, then we're really going to take care of this entity, and we're really going to take care of these things, you need to address psychologically whatever's going on that helped create that. And that isn't going to happen for a lot of people without a little bit of guidance or a little bit of support. And so if I'm going to come and do a house call for you, you sign a contract that says you will go and see a therapist. And it doesn't matter if they're into what I do or not. I don't care. This isn't about me. This is about you, right? I hope that they tell you it's all insanity, and that
Or just talk about the trauma, like the way that experience affected you, because that's something you're gonna fucking need to talk about.
Right. And that's it. Right. So you have to have both. You have to approach everything holistically if you really want results.
I hope.
Right.
Why didn't you just get us an FCC thing?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's what editing's for.
I may have dropped an F-bomb along with chip coffee on a radio show. It's comfortable, and we just, I didn't get it back.
No worries at all. All right. Well, it is time to let you guys go. I know we've barely touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to bad vibes, but that's all the more reason for people to go grab the book. So I want to give the mic to you guys to tell everybody where they can find you, find your work. It's all yours.
No, go
Too
for it.
polite for each other. You can find me if you want. I teach classes almost all online now. Find me on patreon.com/haunted. Is probably the easiest thing if you want to get access to my classes. My website is michellebelanger.com. Harder to spell than patreon.com/haunted.
Yeah. So, and then for me, I mean, honestly, everything's over at modernwitch.com. And so it's just modernwitch.com. All the information, my podcasts, I've got over 10 years of podcasts that are on there. We've got a little bit of a network going on with other people. So if you really want to just talk about the psychic stuff, there's a great show on our network called The Circleist Podcast. And it's with my husband, Matt Oren, and then Rachel True from the
Award-winning.
Yeah, award-winning. Yeah, it's award-winning now. Yeah. And so, we're very dedicated on our side to providing for the community and for people who are confused or just need a little bit of help so they can keep going and doing living their best lives. Right. So We put all that over on modernwitch.com. And then if you want more about me and you want to see what I do, then I'm on Facebook and Insta at Mr. Devin Hunter. That's it.
So yeah, I'm social media Seth Anakim. I make everything hard to spell, I think. But mostly I'm just over on Blue Sky these days because everything else is just a lot.
That's fair.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, I feel we've gotten too much into a lot of the social medias, but it is a necessary demon to be a part of stuff. So I just want to thank you guys for coming on. I'm going to put you in limbo for just a second, and then we'll close out, and we'll let you know what's going on after that.
All right.
All right, folks, check out the Bad Vibes Field Guide. It's an amazing book. Like I said, we didn't even get to touch the tip of the iceberg. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, no matter where you're listening. This has been a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. Make sure you're checking out all the great shows that we have on here. And yeah, until next week, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Erik. Peace.